All right, it says we're live. I'll believe it. I'll hope that you can see me. I'll hope that you can hear me. Not only am I doing the whole remote streaming thing, I'm in a totally different state. Not using even Wi-Fi, just all cellular. So hopefully this works. Hopefully it's looking and sounding decent enough to listen to, but forget the quality of the video. How about the topic at hand? Tomas Hertl today coming through with an 8-year extension with the San Jose Sharks. And I think for Tomas, a lot of relief. For certain Sharks fans, a lot of relief. I also realize there's a group of Sharks fans who doesn't like the long-term commitment to players anymore because maybe there's a thought that the reason the Sharks are kind of in between right now is a handful of those longer contracts. I'll just make sure that we're good on the stream. Yep. All right, you can see me, you can hear me. That's great. So we'll get to all aspects of this. I think first off, having just talked to Tomas, and I already see what Zach's comment is: cap space. It's the commitment. It's not the fact that you're committing to the individual. It's the cap space commitment. That's what we're talking about here. So we'll get into all that. Yes, I'm in desert dog territory. Absolutely, Dalton. I can't bring the comments up on the screen, but I see them, and I will respond to as many as I can. So just to summarize, 8 years for Tomas and the days counting down, right, until March 21st. That's the NHL's trade deadline, and you knew the Sharks had to do one of really two things: retain Tomas Hertl or use his value and trade him as a rental situation and get some assets in return. And it turns out that they're going to get Hertl services for probably the rest of his career. I mean, what has it already been? Almost 10 years. I think we're 9 years into his career, and another 8 to come. A player who has checked all the boxes in terms of good teammate, durability. I want to throw that in there, and I understand that he's had 2 knee injuries, but they were very apparent knee injuries among all the injuries that he has suffered. And it's not fair to ever sit here and judge injuries one versus another. They're apples and oranges in a lot of different ways. But my point is that the injuries he suffered over the years is because he's a gritty player, not afraid to get in there and use his body. And certainly one of those knee injuries with Dustin Brown has nothing to do with him. That was unlucky and unfortunate all in the same breath. But yeah, durable player, like I said, good teammate. I really don't need to spell out all the accolades for Tomas Hertl. I think it's very, very clear. But, now he is the longest tenured Shark. And this franchise still needs to turn its direction. It still needs to be a bit flexible, I think, in the next few years to bring in younger players and to hopefully get, the right cap space situation to be able to acquire the talent it needs. I go back to even the Sharks of this season. I mean, think how long, first off, missed Erik Karlsson for a significant portion, about a month and a half. And also other respective players with COVID situations and whatnot. But I mean, the overall overarching thing is the type of player who was not on the Sharks this year, and that is the skill set of somebody like Evander Kane. Think of what this Sharks team would be. They spend up to the cap pretty much every year. And if they had done that this year, you probably would have had an additional 30-plus goal scorer on your team to go along with, Hertl's 25 and Timo's 25 up to this point. So what I'm saying here is that his contract at 8 years, $8 million, certainly it could have been more. I'm not one to really love diving into the money part. I know that's an aspect to consider all the time in professional sports. There's no question about it. But I think a relatively team-friendly deal, certainly the years get him there. And if I've understood it correctly, is there a no-move clause, a no-trade clause for the first couple of years and then a no-move clause after that? So there's a variety. There's a creative, how should I say this? A creative complement of assets beyond the years and beyond the money part of this that go along for Tomas Hertl. These are things that he will want, that any player would want and command. Now, let me just say this. Could Tomas Hertl have signed this deal? This is always something to consider. Could he have signed this exact same deal elsewhere? I'm going to say yes, right here, right now, yes, he could have signed it elsewhere. Let me take it one step further. Could he have signed even a more lucrative deal somewhere else? Could he have squeezed $9 million a year for 8 years, or even 7 years? Maybe that works out to be the same dollar amount. But my point is, could he have squeezed a little bit more juice from a different orange? Probably. I firmly believe he could have. So the fact that this happens in San Jose, I mean, the one question I threw to him in the press conference, which ultimately I'll upload the video, you'll get to see. I think there's an aspect of loyalty here. Tomas Hertl, when he came to San Jose, was a young man who was unmarried. I'm not even sure if he was dating at that point. He definitely wasn't a father, which he has since become. His English was a work in progress, and he knows that too, right? So it was I don't want to say it was hard for him to come over here and find success, but it was definitely a tougher path. I'm going to scoot this chair up, I think, if I can. It was a tougher path than most have to take. This is the problem when I'm in a hotel, and I don't know how to scoot the chair up. I'm going to move this down here. Stand by 1 second. There we go. All right, that's a little bit better. I was sitting up too stiff eventually. Now I think we're square. But he's a person who's had so much life happen, and I think that kind of breeds the loyalty that he's all about. He's a person who has come here, had success, and all the people he named, the people he's got to watch in his career firsthand, the Pavelskis, the Marlows, the Thorntons. He realizes what's possible in San Jose. And I think, from his perspective right now, maybe the next year or two, hopefully less than more, there's going to be some growing and building still happening around him. I don't think he can definitely understand that. There's no question about it. But I think it's clear to me the loyalty that he has, that he's been around here a long time. He's seen enough over the long term to make this decision. Had he come here 3 years ago, 2 years ago, I don't think he's re-signing at all. I think a large part of why he wanted this deal and why it may not even have been the absolute best possible deal out there for him is because he's a loyal guy. He has entrenched in Arizona, in San Jose, and that's it. By the way, if you can't tell, my brain is very mushy. Traveling today, a Matt Chapman trade this morning. This might be the record setter for me. I did a live stream from my house this morning, and now I'm doing a live stream from Arizona here at 6:26 p.m. And Felix, thank you for the clarification. I had it backwards there. That's what I get for reading it on my phone earlier in transit. A full no move clause for years 1 through 3, and then limited no trade clause for years 4 through 8. So it actually opens up, and that would make more sense, right? It opens up the flexibility in the second half of his contract. It's still an NTC, but a limited NTC, meaning there is a little bit more flexibility to it. How much, straight from Felix again, how much do I think Evander Kane not being a Shark anymore plays a factor in Hertl's re-signing? That's a very pointed question, Felix, and I'll say this. I mentioned Kane's name earlier because I'm telling you that the team this year would most certainly have benefited from he or a player of his services, like a 30-plus goal scorer, like he was on pace for last year. I think the fact that the Sharks, that's a tough decision to basically take your MVP from last season and not integrate him back into your group. Think about that dilemma. But it goes to show you how firm the Sharks were that they thought that bringing Kane back might affect the group as is and the group moving forward. And so I wouldn't say, and I'm going a long way around this, Felix, to maybe answer it in a simple fashion. There may be something to that. I mean, Kane was on a long-term deal here too, had a handful of years remaining. I don't want to say that that's not the only reason. I mean, like I said before, I think the main reason for Hertl was his loyalty, what he's seen in San Jose over the years, what he believes in, the people he believes in, and the process he believes in. I think those are all contributing factors. Now, probably the best way to sum it up with Kane, if he were still around, that definitely would have complicated this process. It would complicate other processes probably for the Sharks in what they're doing and what comes next. So, no, but I think that's a fair question. I mean, it's definitely on minds for sure. I think, Tomas, you look at his career progression. Do you remember the time where he was a third line winger, right? And then it was a battle of Tomas as a winger versus a centerman. I mean, I should have probably dove into a little bit more of that in my chat with him earlier, but that's another aspect. How much personal growth, but professional growth. I mean, a player that went from I don't know if he can play center on a nightly basis in this league to definitely doing that, to becoming an all-star, to becoming one of the leading scorers. I think that Hertl is actually entering. I mean, the contract would suggest it, but I think it's very clear that we have seen a lot of Tomas Hertl, but he's only really entering the prime years, like maybe starting last year and this year, and hopefully that can continue. And I also know too, when you sign something like this with somebody for this many years and this much money, you also want to be sold on the person. And I'm just a firm believer on that. Beyond anything and everything else, of all the contracts the Sharks have ever given out, and this is probably a bold statement, of all the people they've ever had, I feel like you know who this is. You know who you're getting, what you're getting in Tomas Hertl. This is not I hope it works out type deal. I mean, this is a pretty legitimate understanding of who the player is. On that note, let me also go back to who Tomas Hertl is not. And that is a span recently of 15 games. It was right before the Ducks game or right before the first Kings game? There was a span of 15 in a row where Hertl had 1 goal, had 4 assists. All of those assists were on the power play. He was a -11 in 15 games. He was never a plus player in any of those games. Now, what does all of that tell you? Those aren't his stats. And to me, I think it's plain to see there was a little bit of frustration. There was a little bit of maybe confusion in this process. I mentioned it on television, and I hate to get personal. I'm not here to tell you what's on somebody's mind, but that's a big life, decision, yes, but also big life situation. He was either going to get traded by March 21st or he was going to sign a new deal. The time was ticking on this. And I think that was weighing on his shoulders. And I think it reflected in his play. Now, Curtis told me one night, hey, as a pro, you don't ever want that to leak into your game. But honestly, I'm a human, he's a human, you're all human. How could it not leak into his game? How could that not be a factor? Thinking about the only team and the only franchise he's ever known. And now you're on the cusp of it changing just like that. And then maybe the Sharks traded him to the Rangers. Okay, now you're only playing a couple weeks in New York, and then you're a free agent, and maybe they don't want to re-sign you. Then you're going to change teams all over again. So the point being, I just think that all of this is a weight off his shoulders, as much as it is an answer to a question a lot of Sharks fans had. This was a burning number one topic for, honestly, the last 2+ months. As it emerged, as we got closer. I mean, it was out of training camp and into the season. Usually this is when deals happen. with the Sharks and their players. It went a little bit longer than that. It went to the final handful of days, but we still have 5 days to spare before they probably would have done something. Zach has a good question. How do you sign Barabanov, Meyer, and Ferraro now? Those are all important players. And I would hope that it's all been legitimately discussed, figured out. If you are Joe Will and you're Doug Wilson and you're the Sharks, and let me talk about that in just a second too, I don't think there's any question you do this deal with the consideration for those other 3 that were mentioned, and of course the other additions too. I think in part, like circling back to Evander Kane, far as I understand, I mean, there's no cap money from his contract, which should be, everything should be finalized by the start of next year, right? The grievance process, any type of, monies back and forth, all that should be settled. But I mean, there is alone $7 million a year in cap space that Kane was commanding that now does not exist on the cap. So, I mean, in a way, I know the question was before, if Kane were around, would Hertl have done this long-term deal? It may not have even been possible. This type of money may not have been possible for Hertl if Kane was under contract. So I see the question too. How do I feel about the market for Middleton right now, considering... Sorry, my screen, it's cutting off halfway through the... let me try and reload this. Well, I know you're asking about Middleton, Felix, and I apologize why this is not scrolling up. I'm scared to refresh this. I wonder who you're talking about. It says, how do I feel about the market for Middleton considering, and then it just stopped. All right, I'll work on that. I think I know what you're talking. Let's just address Middleton. I don't know who the other player you're referencing is. I think Jake Middleton has been, in a lot of ways, a pleasant surprise. I'm not sure that he fit in so well with Carlson on that pairing. He's played with a couple other defensemen in a year where I think like Nikolai Knyzhov and Megna was out for a bit with an injury. There were a lot of hopefuls. It's no disrespect. I don't know that Jake Middleton was one of those top tier hopefuls for the Sharks, like this is his year, but he has definitely become that. Honestly, I think he has emerged in the same way that Knyzhov did last year. Knyzhov, to me, was one of the best things to come out of 2021. And unfortunately hasn't been around at all since then. So, man, I wish I was able to scroll through this. My chat has locked up here. All right. Well, that's not good. And like I said, I don't want to. I got the computer over here. I don't want to refresh this because if I do, I might lose it entirely. And I'm still not certain about this. Hopefully, I answered the question, Felix. And unfortunately, I'm not sure that I will get to too many more here. But I've been on long enough just to explain and just to recap. Tomas Hertl just spoke. As you would imagine, he was all smiles. I realize, like I said before, let me just touch on the other side of this for fans who are maybe uneasy about another long-term deal. I don't think anybody out there is saying, oh, why did it have to be Hertl? No, I don't think anybody's saying that at all. I think there is a bit of reluctance of, oh, that's a pretty big commitment. And even if it were Wayne Gretzky coming back right now, that's just a big commitment to anybody. And so I understand that. I do feel like, though, of all the players that have come in, like, Kane was here for a quarter of a season and those playoffs, and then it was time for a contract extension. Or other players like that who have come in and been extended. Here's a player, like I said, who has been around since 2013. You really know what you're going to get in Tomas Hertl. So you can really see that trajectory, and there's no reason to believe that it won't follow that. Again, I also think you have to ask yourself the honest question, market value. Would he have commanded 8 years, $8 million somewhere else? Yes. Could he have commanded even more and better than that somewhere else? I think it's a high possibility. So the fact that this happens in San Jose, yeah, everybody should feel really good about this. I look forward to it. I look forward to, what he can do for the team. And let me also address this. The flip side would have been not re-signing him at all. For those that are, in the whole contract side of it, like, whoa, that's a lot of years. I think there are some out there who said, let's just not even do this at all, and let's try and trade him for picks. Let me pose this to you, though. How many picks and players would you get for a rental like Hertl in such a short, like, the deadline this year is so late in the season that we're going to have, players are going to be with their new teams for 5 weeks of the regular season. Players that get traded before the 21st. They're literally going to play the last week of March, 3+ weeks of April, and then the playoffs. It's not an extended rental period. So I don't know that any rental is going to get that much of a return. And then, like, hypothetically, all right, Sharks get a high pick and they get a prospect. Okay, does the prospect pan out? And if so, in how many years? I mean, hockey is not like the NBA or football where it's a, instant or 2-year process and then bang, your team is better. It's like a 5-year process a lot of times until that player is actually ready to contribute. Like the Eklund situation, that's a rarity that a player gets drafted in the summer, debuts with the team in the fall. I mean, that rarely happens in this league. And the fact that the Sharks tried it, I credit them. And now, honestly, I credit them that they saw that through the course of an 82-game season, it wouldn't have been the best thing for William Eklund. But it will be eventually. So that's the thing here. If the Sharks didn't sign Hertl, traded him, decided to get the value out of that, how many more years would it have taken to get a return that's worthwhile? You're then talking about a Sharks team that has to be, that may not be reaping those benefits until 2026 or 7. That's a long ways off. Also, just want to say, if you look at teams that are reworking their personnel, look at the LA Kings. And I know they're struggling now with a lot of injuries, but what has catapulted that group? Sure, it's a bunch of young players that panned out exactly how LA was hoping for, and I'm a big Todd McClellan fan, so I would selfishly say that's part of it too. But that's an LA team that kept their Dowdies and their Kopitars and their Jonathan Quicks. It's not a team that when you talk about, retooling, rebuilding, restructuring, whatever the word is you want to use, whatever, they did it with keeping some of their pillars. And I think the Sharks could be capable of that exact same thing too, in a similar fashion. All right, so that's it. Happy for Tomas. I know I'm talking about this on professional levels and team levels, but overall, as somebody who remembers his first game with the Sharks, who did some of his first interviews ever with the Sharks, this is dream. I don't like LA much. Fun must be always. He belongs here, and I'm glad that today for him is a huge sigh of relief, and that he can move forward, and now the team can move forward in trying to build with and around Tomas Hertl. So thank you, everybody, for being here. I know this isn't the fanciest of setups. Look, it's gotten dark now behind me. I'm going to try and find some dinner and get a little bit of sleep tonight. And then tomorrow, baseball mode, spring training from here in Arizona. So I'll be doing some live streams on the A's, and I'll tell you what I learned from over in Mesa. All right? Be safe, everybody. I'll talk to you soon.